All right. So thanks to all the med students joining us again. This week's virtual panel, we're discussing wellness with another all-star lineup here. Will you guys give us a wave so they can see you too? We've got Elise Lovell, our illustrious program director, who keeps changing her background. He was in San Francisco just not long ago. And then Matt Aronson is back for week 2. Matt was here for critical care last week. And then Tim Henderson, give us a wave as well. There's Hendo. And today we're going to talk about wellness. And for those of you guys who have been here before, you know we usually lead with a couple quick slides, and they keep getting quicker each week, which is great. So we always start with our program leadership beliefs. These are sort of the guiding principles at our residency program. The first is that we aim to train expert emergency physicians. The second is to create an environment of wellness and support. The third is individual career preparation. And the fourth is diversity and inclusion. And we always try and tie these into the discussion for the day. Actually, I would argue wellness kind of falls into all of these in some way, but obviously the second bullet point is the most obvious. And so we're going to talk about that at length today. And basically, the background on this is that residency can be really, really tough. It's a pretty intense 3 years. We've got a pretty, hectic and chaotic environment. And in order to kind of balance that, we have to try and basically make it our goal to create an environment where people can be happy and well and kind of do all those things outside of the department or even while they're there that keeps them happy and whole. We've got a couple of quick slides. This is probably the big one. And I won't go into great detail on this because it's really, really long, but these are kind of some of the highlights or the things that we have implemented or that we value that we think kind of helps create this environment. So the first is that we do a full month of orientation at the start of residency for the interns. And that month is less about like learning emergency medicine and more about getting to know one another, getting to know the city, trying to figure out how to make the medical record and the department and the system kind of work so that when you kind of start your second block, whatever you may be on, you can kind of hit the ground running and make things a little bit easier. We've got an actual wellness curriculum that runs longitudinally throughout your 3 years. We also have a residency retreat that we do every year, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Even this year, we got one off, which was great. We fit it in before COVID starts surging again. We do first year check-ins. Actually, we do check-ins with every level of residency. And these are check-ins basically where we're trying to look for any issues that we can head off ahead of time and just kind of elicit feedback from the residents on how we as the RLT or the leadership team can do better and things that we can do, or especially with dealing with off-service things that we can get ahead of just to make it a better learning environment. We do offer protected time for medical and dental appointments. And so each resident is allotted time outside of their conference requirements to go do things and take care of themselves. We think that's really important. We offer an employee assistance program, which is basically resources, whether it's psychologists or whatever it may be, to help you with things that you're dealing with in your personal life. And actually, when the orientation month begins, each intern has an appointment with them just to kind of establish a relationship. It's not mandatory and you can opt out, but it's a great way to kind of get things going from the start. Each intern or each resident is assigned a upperclassman to kind of be a mentor, as well as a faculty member. And those can sort of fluctuate based on career aspirations and other things, but we want to make sure that there's good actual mentorship from the first day. One of the most highly valued things from the residents is these class days off, which is basically the scheduling chiefs make sure that at least once every half year, the entire class can be off together, or almost the entire class if somebody's on trauma or something. Because it's crazy. You spend so much time around each other, but it's really hard to be around each other as a class because somebody's always working in the department. The department never sleeps. So that's a really highly valued experience for the residents. In general, the residents have a ton of autonomy. They play a huge role in the department, decision-making, every aspect of the program and the department, and that helps as well. We're always open to resident input, and we do our 6-month evals like every program should be doing, and really that input helps to guide a lot of the changes in our program and our department, as these guys can tell you. And then probably the most practical thing is that particularly Elise is reachable at all times. So every resident has our numbers, and we are always texting Aronson and I text far too frequently, and usually not about emergency medicine, but we're always open to discussion sort of at any time. And so those things I think are super helpful. This is a quick picture at our residency retreat, and I'm gonna have one of you guys talk about that later once we get through the intros and stuff. But we do this every year, and we usually get over, this was in Michigan, and we try and get over to the beach in the late summer, early fall. This year, we weren't able to because of COVID. I actually get a little bit of palpitations just looking at this group. Isn't that crazy how it changes your mindset? But where we spend the nights together and, we do kind of small group discussions about the program, but a lot of it is just having fun together and bonding, and it's an awesome experience in general. This year, we did it in the kind of Chicagoland area because of travel restrictions, but it was awesome to still be able to get a retreat off, even with masks and things. Hendo, you were on this team. I forgot about this. This is the championship team was that last year or the year before? Last year, I think. We had a pasta making contest. The residents are in charge of cooking dinner, and the residency leadership team gets to sort of tear them apart, their recipes. But these guys took home the prize, and this is their classmates enjoying their meal. And then, of course, what wellness initiative would not be complete without yoga? Yoga in isolation is not enough to make people well, but it can be helpful when used appropriately. So we always try and end our retreats with yoga, which everybody sort of loves. And so before we go further into the questions and everything else, I'm going to have you guys maybe just introduce yourselves, especially for some of the applicants who may not have been here or seen you before. So maybe just tell us where you're from, and what your year is, and we'll get into more specifics afterwards. Let me stop sharing. And Elise, I'll have you go first.
Okay. Yeah, welcome all. I'm very excited to have this session, mostly because, this was one of the two things that I was really focused on when I became program director 3 years ago. It was all about well-being for the residents and diversity, inclusion, and equity. Those are my two big challenges that I was trying to work on. I've been at Christ now for going on about 20 years. So before becoming program director, I was associate program director. Before that, assistant program director. I actually trained originally at the University of Cincinnati. That was my alma mater for emergency medicine, and did a little work out in the community after that, doing actually locum tenens. So I was traveling around the country and working in different places before I moved back to Chicago. My family's up in Wisconsin, which was sort of the draw to come back. And I adore the place. I adore the people. It's just an amazing program, and I'm just very, very grateful every day to be working here. So that's me.
Awesome. Thank you, Elise. And then Hendo, let's have you go next.
Sure. Hey guys, I'm Tim Henderson. I'm from Chatham Center, New York, which is sort of near Albany. Some action outside. I went to the University of Vermont for med school, and then couples matched in Chicago with my fiance, who's an OB resident at Northwestern. And Christ is a great place.
Okay, be safe over there, whatever you're doing, Hendo. And then Aronson, we'll have you go next.
Cool. I have like 25 minutes to talk. Just kidding. Matt Aronson. What's up, guys? Pumped to see you. Third year, from Boston originally. Then I was out in California for a while to work before med school, and then I went to med school at Loyola in Chicago. Rotated at Christ as a med student, and would have signed on the dotted line as a rotator if that was possible. I'm obsessed with Christ, and I'm obsessed with my co-residents and my attending. So we've had a lot of time playing around with wellness initiatives and stuff like that. So Tim and I have had a blast.
Aronson was on the crit care panel yesterday because he's going into critical care and matched at Northwestern. Will be doing his fellowship next year and staying local, which is awesome. Elise pointed out in the chats that Aronson has lion fur growing out of his head, which is awesome. This is also a good time to point out, if any of you guys have questions at any time, either butt in or feel free to shoot your questions in the chat, and I'll insert them afterwards. So Aronson and Hendo, basically I was going to randomly pick residents to join us today, but I picked these guys in particular because they have organized roles in running our wellness curriculum and kind of the wellness component of our residency in general. So a lot of our seniors, actually all of our seniors, have a title residency director of something. And so even if you're not that traditional chief resident role, you can focus on whatever it is that you're passionate about and sort of build a resume and sort of lead there. And so these guys have both been really involved in the wellness component of our program. They also, each resident has to complete a resident project, and typically that's a research component, though it doesn't have to be. It can be any sort of presentation, QI initiatives. But these guys specifically chose a wellness curriculum, a randomized study, etc. as theirs. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. I may actually have you guys lead with that. Let's talk a little bit about the curriculum. We'll keep it short, and then we can get into some of the finer details about wellness and programs. So I'm going to pull this up one second because I think it's super. I think the cool thing about this with you guys is that it's about wellness. It's about your passion. It's about your career prep. It's about your resident project. There's so many different aspects of the program that I think it kind of shows or demonstrates. So I'm going to pull this up really quick, and we can kind of show them what you guys were interested in and how you kind of curtailed that into your project and kind of career planning stuff as well. Oops, let me open this up. All right. So who wants to lead?
I'll take it, and we can just kind of switch off slides. You cool with that, Hendo? You knew I was going to take it. There was no doubt. Okay. Anyway, honestly, I'll be as PC as possible. I think wellness was a hot buzz topic kind of as I was finishing med school, and everyone wanted to go to the residency program that honored wellness, and now it's become sort of a nebulous thing that we want to care about our residents, and is it just yoga, stuff like that. So we wanted to make actionable things that the residents could be part of, that we would share with people. And I was spouting off something about a podcast I was listening to, or something I'd read in the charting room as an intern, I think during our orientation month. And Tim overheard me talking, and then we just locked in and talked about a lot of what we are seeing here for probably an hour straight the first day, and then never stopped talking about it. So anyways, we basically want to bring a lot of this sort of mental preparedness, focus on sort of the not soft skills, but the less tangible things about being a doctor, especially an acute care doctor, like an ER doctor, that we thought were more salient in these other worlds, but we couldn't believe that they weren't part of the formalized training here. So Hendo and I each had some experience with, happened to be sports for us, but of course there's a million other places that's relevant. We have a few listed here. And we wanted to sort of bring that in a formalized curriculum, and then eventually a study to our co-residents and to our attendings.
Is this, I never asked this question. Is this you here?
Yes, that's I would call that less than a half second of fame. That was actually shown on ESPN. That's me. That's Andrew Wiggins for all the basketball fans out there. That is a 12-foot rafter up there. So, and that is at the top of my head, and look at where his hips are. So that was a former life where I used to train athletes, and I was a lot cooler. I remain pretty cool though.
Debatable. And so basically what these guys were trying to do is take these techniques that have been used in competitive sports, the military, even in the business world, and apply it to medical education and emergency medicine. And so they had a lot of great ideas. And the first thing I did was sit down with them and figure out how can we organize this into an actionable plan, preferably something that will meet your requirements as a project. And in this case, they turned it into a study. And then a curriculum as well. And so I'm going to flip through these a little bit. You guys want to comment on this one at all? That's cool if not. All right. And so will you walk us through this technique, which some of them may actually be familiar with?
Yeah, sure. So this was something that was created by Mike Gloria and Scott Weingart. It's actually that guy who's on the prior slide, all kitted out. And it's just like Matt was saying, an actionable technique to essentially perform better under stress. So it's broken out exactly how it's written on the slide: breathe, talk, which is self-talk, positive talking, seeing, so it's mental rehearsal, and then having some sort of trigger word that sort of cues on your focus. And this had been described, as actually published in Annals. They got this exact picture in Annals, which they were pretty proud of. And we then decided to take this and turn it into a study, because no one had actually studied this in emergency medicine in a resuscitation in an actual stressful environment, and see whether or not there was any measurable difference in perceived and reported stress and anxiety and biometric data. So we actually got a whole bunch of heart rate monitor and collected heart rate data from participants at this big sim sort of, I don't know, jam, I guess, that happens with all the second-year residents in Chicago.
So one of the great things about training in Chicago is we're sort of like this hotbed of emergency medicine. And it's this really cool, you know, almost like synergistic environment where we get together, we do conferences a couple of times a year, and a lot of times we work together on things like this. And so we call it Simtastic, which is where all the programs get together and pair up and actually trade sites, and our attendings will do sim with the residents from the other programs. And we do standardized cases so that we're all doing the same cases across the program. So this seems like an obvious and awesome opportunity to sort of implement this technique with a large number of residents in a standardized setting, which is kind of unique. We're blessed to be in an area with so many residents who are willing to participate. So we called up all of our friends in Chicago and got the whole gang together. And so for a couple of days there, Elise and Hendo and Aronson and a couple of us spread out across the city. I was on the north side, the south side, everywhere, Northwestern. And basically we implemented this. But the prep work was basically that half of the residents were exposed and learned this technique, and the other half did not. And then they went and they did these standardized resuscitations. They wore the heart rate monitors, and they took surveys before and afterwards. And we sort of gauged their stress levels and how they did. And the results of that, you guys ultimately, you can tell them where you presented that and kind of where you're going next with that.
Yeah, so we presented at ACEP, which was pretty cool. And then basically we're like going to formally publish the study, so we don't want to give too much detail. But the punchline is it was amazing. Just kind of what we found with our own curriculum, which we'll comment on in a second, is like just the sort of minimal exposure. A lot of like ER residents who are like attracted to this sort of like performing under pressure, how much formal exposure they've had, but then how much they were like eating it up and wanted more of it. And so that was like really exciting for us.
And so that was the first part, right? But medicine's about more than studies. And for these guys, they really wanted to make an impact on the program as well. And so after they did this enormous and incredible study, they also sort of created a curriculum to share with their classmates that hopefully will continue in perpetuity. And I'll have you guys just break this down really briefly so you can show them what sort of lectures and things were you exposed to at Christ.
Do you want to take it, Hen?
Hendo froze. Aronson,
Okay.
take it.
Oh, that's a sign.
I think it's back. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're good. We can hear you. You're good.
Okay. So yeah, we created this whole curriculum because we wanted it to be something more than just that one-off study. And we sort of broke it down to like, this is basically the general roadmap of the curriculum. But it effectively ended up being like a series of lectures where we try to touch on a different topic of mental performance and give all of our co-residents actual like usable skills that they can.
Aronson, will you take over while he freezes?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, so again, it's hitting on this theme of like actionable skills that like, you know, that residents, especially people that maybe not are as prone to reading on, you know, some of this stuff. It's like cognitive science, you know, performance science, literature, and make it, you know, very tangible, very real to their day-to-day, and then stuff that they could take like on shift with them. And we've like kind of left it like pretty wide open because we saw that there would be a lot of traction and that, you know, other, you know, our, you know, basically our friends and colleagues would be taking this on. And so things like, again, COVID has limited some of this, but we already obviously talked about the simulation, this stress inoculation training, which is this breathe, talk, see, focus paradigm we brought in. And then other team building activities and guest lecturers will make this, you know, more than just like a couple lectures and then go listen to this podcast. We wanted to sort of make it like a holistic experience.
That is going to end our show there, and we'll kind of open it back up. So give me 1 second. So really cool stuff there. I think a great example of how you guys kind of took something that you were passionate or excited about, created a curriculum, created a project, and it's something that'll kind of stick with the program forever. And I think actually it is a really unique strength now as a result. So that's really cool kind of global stuff. But some of what we wanted to talk about today, and some of the questions I got ahead of time were more about the micro level stuff, the day-to-day stuff that kind of we do at the program. And I think that's equally important. So we got a question about the orientation itself, and kind of the setup and what goes on during that. I'm letting Hendo back in. We can maybe let him talk if he wants to. Hendo, are you here? Let's see. Can you hear us?
Sorry. Dealing with some 1995 technology here, the compact Presario.
Hendo, will you walk us through a little bit, just tell us a little bit about the orientation month and kind of what that setup is like?
Yeah. So orientation month is basically a dream. It's a month where you have very few, if any, responsibilities. There are a lot of didactics and a lot of sim and a lot of lectures, but really like no one actually expects you to remember any of that. It's just there to sort of get your feet wet in the medicine, but really it's there for you to like figure out like kind of where the bathroom is. Like where's the room? Where's the lounge? Like where are things at Christ? It's there for you to meet your co-residents and spend some time building those relationships, because those people are going to be the ones who really are closest to you for the next 3 years. And you get an opportunity to learn about Chicago. You get a sweet, like protected weekend, or maybe it's 3 days for your intern retreat where you get some money from the program and, travel restrictions willing, you get to go somewhere. So we went up to like Wisconsin and you just have this great weekend hanging out. And it's sort of the whole month is like that. So it's awesome. It's pretty unique. I think I only remember like one other program maybe had an orientation month, and it's pretty fun when like all your friends from med school are, getting killed on the wards and you're like, I'm hanging out. It's great.
And there's a reason for that. So we think it's really important to get to know your classmates and kind of establish those relationships before you get thrown to the fire. So there's a reason for all that. And so once you've sort of set that groundwork, we release you guys into the hospital to do your thing. Another person had asked a little bit more specifically about the retreat and what goes on there aside from yoga. And so Aronson, I think you helped plan the retreat. Maybe talk a little bit. Let's talk about what it is on a regular year. Obviously, COVID retreat was awesome, but probably not representative of what we do typically. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think what the retreat is for us is it's both like a sort of mental break, but it's also like one of the most sincere sort of off the cuff times that we get with all of our attendings and the RLT to just give like the most unabashed feedback about like the actual day-to-day experience, which it's not that you can't do that otherwise. Basically the whole day is set up around like this mesh of those two worlds, which I think to me is like what the sort of it factor is for a lot of the program and our approach to wellness, which is like, let's do some stuff, let's get accomplished and like feel like we're making moves, and let's just have a blast while we're doing it. That sounds really cliche, but I actually mean that. So what we try to do is we have like representative people that obviously volunteer from each class that basically are allowed to drive whatever the activities we want in a given day. It's usually over the course of like a day into the next morning. It's all protected time. We're not expected to be anywhere, including any off-service stuff. And essentially there are things that we like to always do as far as like giving feedback, having like some sort of like, physical challenge, like a volleyball tournament or something to that effect, but it's free form. We build it together with RLT and all of our co-residents. And it ends up being like a total absolute blast. And we actually like get a lot of stuff done. You guys can comment more about sort of how it drives actual like next day, next week, next year changes. But honestly, every year something really, tons of important stuff come up that I feel pretty proud to.
Yeah, and so a lot of that retreat is fun. It's eating and hanging and volleyball, which, by the way, the RLT is still the defending champions, and beach time as well. I was last year when it was getting rainy, I was worried about it, but that I actually think I had more fun with that storm coming on the beach than I had in previous years. It was almost like in a weird way spiritual or something, but. So that part's all great, but a lot of what we do too is we do like those individualized group sessions where we elicit feedback on a variety of topics. So Elise, I'll have you talk about yours, but mine was about like recruitment and how we're going to approach this crazy COVID year. And so the fact that we're sitting here right now doing virtual panels was because of feedback from the residents and things that they had wanted. The topics that we are talking about during these panel series were all given to us by the residents. The Instagram takeovers, as outrageous as they may be today, were all ideas from the residents. And so I think this is all kind of living proof of the importance of those meetings. Elise, what was your session at the retreat this year?
Yeah, so mine was about clinical learning in the emergency department and how to optimize it. And yeah, I have to give a shout out because again, this retreat is resident. It's basically resident planned and resident executed. So yeah, the topics that we talk about are topics that are on the minds of the residents, and basically they, we have a small group, and again, obviously, Matt was highly involved this year, but the small group of residents really just makes it happen. And I think that speaks a lot to wellness, because a lot of wellness is all about autonomy and control and having a say in what's going on in your program. And so this is not only ability to give feedback about the program, but actually to drive, I think, one of the most popular events that we have every year, which is the retreat itself. So, you get really meta about it, but there's layers there about wellness, sort of over and over again. And yeah, the stuff that comes out of it, you're right. We've got a big shared Google Doc that the residency leadership team, or RLT, refers to, and we just start, sort of taking things off of that list and turning them into action. And it's basically it's a roadmap for us on how we're going to improve the program, throughout this upcoming year.
And so this year, while we spent hours creating that roadmap, they slip and slided. It was fantastic. And I'm not kidding. Yeah, exactly. Wait, I'm not kidding. So those are kind of the bigger, like hot topic or larger events. But I was wondering if maybe Aronson and Hendo, if you guys could tell us what, like, even if it's a small thing, what was something about the program that either surprised you or you didn't realize how big of a deal it was for you in terms of wellness or work-life balance? Hendo, you can go first.
Scheduling. I'm taking it.
Scheduling. Go ahead. Tell them a little bit about that or why.
Yeah. So for sure, scheduling. We get to essentially make our own schedules, which is pretty unique. So like, I like to ski a lot. So I like to have 2 weeks back to back that I can go skiing, and I'm able to stack vacation weeks back to back and do that, which I think is pretty unique. And, we're able to trade shifts right away. So that definitely gives you the time you need to do the things you want to do outside of work.
So we've talked a lot here and on our website about this one-to-one teaching model and what we call atypical graduated responsibility. The atypical nature of it is that whatever patient comes in is yours because you've got an attending there with you, but you're getting various levels of oversight kind of as you grow. And so as an intern, I'm doing the entire central line with Hendo. As a third year, I maybe are there for parts of it, the most important parts, but I'm not there from start to finish. But the plus side of that is because every shift is one-to-one, unlike a lot of programs, the residents can trade schedule or trade shifts as needed. And so if something comes up, an important life event, you're not limited to having 3 people you can trade with. It's everybody in the department. And so that's like a really big deal, I think. And then even on a micro level, I was a scheduling chief as well. And I didn't realize we went to the chiefs every year, Elise, and they'd send us to either court or SAEM, and you go to these chief conferences where you get to sit with all the chiefs from across the country, which is really cool. But most programs are doing block scheduling where like you'll work, 3 6As, 3 230s, 3 11Ps off, 3 6, and kind of repeating. Ours is different. We've got the scheduling chiefs. Basically, I just reviewed the schedule for next block from them, but they spend a ton of time creating a schedule that meets everybody's requests. And so before we make a block schedule, everybody gets to log into BiteBlock. pick off what days or times they need off because they've got weddings or family events or whatever it may be. And then the chiefs spend a great deal of time creating a schedule that allows everybody to have that. And so it's a lot easier to do or to make it to the really important things when you don't have a pre-templated block schedule. And instead you have one that's been customized to meet everybody's needs ahead of time. So that's an enormous thing that I think I took for granted until I met chiefs from across the country and realized how unique it was that we had that. So I think those are all awesome points. Aronson, how about you? Tell us whatever even the small thing it is that meant the most to you for work-life balance or wellness.
Yeah, I'll just kind of play off the model that we have at Christ, which I think is one of the things that sold me completely on the program. It creates a paradigm between your attending, who, for what it's worth, everyone's basically on a first name basis in our ER. It's very sort of it's just a very blue collar feel. So people are very humble in the department, which I think is a huge deal to me personally, as far as just the day-to-day vibe of it. But back to the way you say that we're scheduled one-to-one with attendings is, like you said, interns will come in and they will get the crashing septic patient that needs to be intubated in a central line and the paracentesis or whatever else needs to happen. And they have been a doctor for 7 hours, right? So that creates a vibe wherein you're attending and you are incredibly closely bonded. You get there as a draw for all the seniors to come and help out. And it creates this vibe that I think is unique to Christ of sort of calm within the chaos and this internal bonding that happens. That it's hard to put a finger on, and I'm not lamenting, I don't want to do it on Zoom, but the fact that we can't experience what the department feels like, and that when I rotated, that you could feel this sort of band of brothers and sisters vibe to what was going on there, this unspoken connection. It sounds a little zen, but that is it. That's the intangible thing that sold me.
And I'll say the thing about the nice thing also about the orientation is it's an opportunity to lay all that foundational work. So, as an intern, you can jump in and you can start seeing critically ill patients safely because you've not only, you have your coach, your teammate, you're attending with you, and they're not being distracted by other learners presenting patients, but you also, again, spend a lot of time during that initial month really learning invasive procedures and resuscitation algorithms and all of that. And I'm guaranteeing that our orientation month will adapt this upcoming year because of course a lot of students, you all have missed some time clinically, and so there'll be a sort of a revamping of what we do because it's nice you have this whole be adaptable and make sure that our residents are really as ready to go as possible to jump into our very high acuity, high volume ED setting.
Awesome. Thank you. Elise, well, I got you. I'm going to keep going, which is there's been a big lot of action on Twitter in the last week or so. There's a thread that started from, I think, a PGY3 out east who was talking about basically as an advice to med students. And as they make their Google Docs full of scores and aspects of each program that they go to, she was basically advising that you pay a lot of attention to the way that programs deal with family leave or family emergencies because it was something that she dealt with. And that really meant a lot to her. And I thought that was really important. And it's something I think that the way a program values you, I think it tells you a whole lot about the way that they value. And so I was wondering if you could comment a little bit about kind of maybe, we don't have to get in the nitty gritty of our policies, but kind of where we stand on things like family leave, parental leave, whatever it may be, bereavement, whatever it may be.
Sure. Yeah, I think we are a family first program, and that is about as basic as it gets. And when I say family, I mean that in a very inclusive term. Whether or not you have children, we all have families, right? So, and life happens during residency. It's not this separate event. You're not in a vacuum for 3 or 4 years. And so we appreciate that, there are going to be highs, there are going to be lows, and our job, our dedication is to make sure that our residents are supported throughout all of those experiences. You heard about the scheduling being one way to hopefully get you to the highs, to the weddings and to the joyous occasions. but we also appreciate that, other things happen too. So certainly we understand people get sick, people have to take time off. And certainly, just at very basic levels, things like if you get ill, you're not going to have to pay back shifts or something like that. Illness happens, and that's just the way it goes. And we are there, and that's part of the joy of this program. You've heard Tim and Matt talk about the fact that everyone sort of just is in it together. Our chiefs are always, and a lot of this is happening actually, I don't even hear about it. The shifts get covered and the chiefs are, taking care of stuff behind the scenes, and our residents just jump in and help one another. Even if it's something big that requires a sort of a scheduling shift for, getting somebody off of a very intense rotation, such as trauma, if they experienced a big loss, for example, and moving them into a different rotation for that month. We just move things around and make it happen. Certainly, for things like having a baby, which is happening on a regular basis in our program these days, which is awesome. We're really happy that we have, I think, a fairly reasonable parental leave policy, so that obviously there's a maternal leave policy that's separate and even more sort of, it's generous, that's part of the applicant policy for the, for the person who's actually bearing the child, but then also for the partner, there's a parental leave policy that person gets 2 weeks off, and we're really happy about that. And that's regardless of what you're on. Like, I don't care if you're on trauma, you can be on anything. That's a policy within the system, and that just happens. We've already put that one into place. And again, even on off-service rotations, people just understand that, and the physicians who are leading these other rotations just go along with that. Things like bereavement leave, again, there's a week of bereavement leave, and we've definitely tapped into that as well. And that again is something that's independent of what rotation you're on. So, every time that I've, basically called up someone as far as one of the physicians leading these other off-service rotations and said, hey, we have a resident, there's something that's happened in their life for good or bad. Because of our policies, they are not going to be on your service for this amount of time. It's just accepted. And I think that that's a really special thing about our program and about the relationships we have with the other services, that's an understanding. It's not a pushback thing. And our residents should always feel that they're being supported and that they never have to ask, this is never an exception for them. This is how it is for all of the residents. This is how it should be.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that during the orientation, but I always put it, actually on the very first lecture that we give at orientation, I always say, residency would be perfect if nothing good or no major good or bad things happen and it was just smooth sailing, but that's not reality. And it happens every single month and every single year. And we're used to it, and we want to know about it, because I think the worst thing that you can do is during this pretty crazy or stressful 3 years is keep these things to yourself. And so I think culture is everything. And so we've created a culture where we're open about these issues, and we just sort of, we take care of it. People get excused and they get to go do the things that matter. And so I think that's really important. We talk a lot about work-life balance, and I think that that's a perfect example of it. So
I think COVID is probably the perfect example right now, of course, is we get residents who have had to, take time away for quarantine. Unfortunately, a few have, of course, become ill. That's just the way it goes. Fortunately, nobody seriously. And again, it's the same kind of thing. We just cover those shifts. I always want our residents, if the way it should be, the culture should be, if you start feeling sick, you start getting, URI symptoms, you get a cough, you get a little fever, that's it. You're off your shift, you're off your rotation until we get you tested and we make sure we figure out, what you need as far as potentially further time off. But that our residents are comfortable speaking up and don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to let down, the team, or this is going to be a problem or something like that. This is just the way it should be. No one should be working ill. And I think COVID has really nailed that, down very, very.
Can I add a quick thing to that, Elise?
Yeah, please.
I just, I'm trying to think what questions I would ask on like a wellness panel while I've been away and haven't been in the hospital, or I've been watching this COVID thing unfold, and it has to be an anxious point for you guys. So I would like you guys to know that, and I'm not trying to blow smoke at you guys at the RLT and Elise and Cerrone, but the deal is that there's a few things and on their list of things that are like of critical importance and are hard stops. You will never work if you are at risk of not having enough PPE, if you personally feel uncomfortable. Like, the program leaders will go to bat for you on any situation that would ever come up. So I think coming into I can only imagine coming into a hospital, hearing all this craziness about COVID, all the stress that must bring you, and then having to think I'm going to be the one gowning up and, having to have these family conversations. It could not be more supportive or like comforting to know that we have like our backs at any given time. And that's from our co-residents stepping up, and that's from the RLT here. And I'm biased, obviously, because all I have is you guys, but I've never felt that it would be anything but absurd if I were in a situation that were uncomfortable or dangerous for me. And that includes if you have there is plenty of PPE, but you feel physically uncomfortable. The RLT and the way we handle this stuff is like just open communication. And if you guys were ever concerned about anything, like this is the route, and they got your back.
Thanks, Matt.
Awesome. I'll give you guys, we're trying to be respectful of time. I know you guys are in the midst of a crazy season here, so we don't want to take too much, but if anybody's got any questions, you can hang around to ask them or shoot them in the comments, and we'll hang out for a little bit here. And if not, have a good night, stay healthy, and good luck. You guys are gonna make it through the season, so.
Take care, everybody.
So I do have a very specific, well, not a super specific question, but a specific question.
Please.
Justin Dorsing, I go to University of New England up in Maine. So what sort of either programmatic or institutional level stuff exists for like critical incident management, which like I've thought a lot about more. I have an EMS background, and I've thought about that a lot more this year with COVID and like being overwhelmed and like horrible cases. Like what sort of institutional or programmatic things exist for that?
Yeah. So I think everybody's thinking a lot more about that now. Even before COVID, there'd been so many like large scale disasters or it seems like accidents in society more recently. And so Liz Regan's our what's Liz's title? Disaster. What is her title, Elise?
Czar, like disaster czar, master of disaster, something like that.
Master of disaster.
Disaster preparedness. Yeah, master of
Thank you.
disaster preparedness.
So Liz Regan was a co-chief of mine, and she's now basically in charge of disaster response for not only Christ, but a lot of the advocate system as well. And as a result, she's got a background in this prior to residency, but that's sort of been her focus actually even pre-COVID, which I think helped us a whole lot, and especially in the PPE planning and stuff. And so she was on one of our EMS panels earlier where we talked a little bit, but probably not specifically about this, about how we prepared for that. So we've been doing like larger scale disaster drills as a result, much earlier than the start of COVID. And so like the initial ones, they started, it was a grant funded disaster drill on basically if there was a large scale bombing near Christ. And so it involved like 15 of the local fire departments, and we ran through the ED on kind of that level. And more of a micro level in the EDs, they've been doing like active shooter drills. They've created basically an entire system for a mass casualty or disaster response. And so it's actually automated now within the system. We've got tiers of which residents or which attendings would be called in if needed to, if we were ever short for whatever reason. And so she's basically created an entire department, protocols, and sort of systems for those sorts of issues. I don't know if you had a specific one in mind, but whether that's like bioterrorism, mass casualty, whatever it may be, that's the stuff we've been drilling on basically since she took over 4 or 5 years ago.
And she basically kept us safe during the first COVID wave. And she was superhuman in her efforts as far as establishing the incident command center and just incredibly detailed protocols about how everything would be handled, and her level of foresight and her just degree. I mean, she just didn't sleep for a very long time, and so
Should be written in a book, Elise.
Yeah, she you see these amazing stories about people coming out, in the popular press and stuff. And I mean, Liz Regan, one should be written about her. So yeah, her dedication is really unparalleled, and she continues to apply that same energy, but now hopefully for different initiatives moving forward.
Did they answer, Justin?
Yeah, I think, somewhat. Kind of even more on top of that, like some of the like post-incident stress management stuff of like, if there is a bad case, like, is there anything built in, like I don't have a specific case in mind, but I mean like, you know, a terrible case or a terrible patient in the ED that is like stressing out the department or the particular resident or something like that. Like,
Yeah,
how
it's
have
a
you
great.
responded to that in the past?
Yeah, Elise, you can probably talk a little bit more about this, but kind of the most recent thing is that this may have come out of the retreat last year, but the residents asked that we basically create what we call a code pause, which is, you know, these things happen in the ED, even just on a regular day, long before COVID, though they happen more frequently now. And this was basically one of our attendings, Josh Sherman, brought this from where he trained. And the idea was when this happens or we have these terrible cases, we call a pause, we tap the brakes, we stop assigning patients to that team. And actually the chaplain was playing a role. Basically, their goal was to take some time to debrief with the care team, doctors, residents, nurses, whoever may have been involved. And basically just, you know, acknowledging that somebody was lost, somebody's family member, and that weighs on all of us, and to ask for thoughts and basically how do we move forward after this. And so that was kind of the more formalized approach recently. I think a lot of this stuff has been unwritten and sort of, you know, things we just do. And so it was different for us to kind of formalize it and create an actual code or process for those debrief episodes. But I think it's been well received. To the point now where we have some residents who probably do it better than some of us because they're more used to it. And that's something too that I think our off-service rotations do a great job of. One thing, we learned a lot of that from our pediatric colleagues. I think they do a great job with this in our peds hospital. And so the first time I was ever exposed to this was on my PICU rotation when we had the loss of a couple of kids in one night. And they did such an incredible job with it that's kind of helped lay the groundwork for some of this as well. So nice thing is we've got colleagues or off services who have, I think have been doing this for a while, probably better than us. And it's been helpful to work with them through it.
And we've had in conference as well. And again, you know, a shout out to Tim and to Matt, you know, it just as recently as just last week, talking as part of that, you know, the wellness curriculum that you both are putting forward. It was a time to talk about sort of the stresses of COVID and the sort of the concerns and anxiety about the second wave. You know, we've had time in conference to talk about some of the social unrest and the protests, and you know, Chicago has been a big center of that, and sort of how that is affecting all of us, and how we can you know, more effectively connect with our patients in the community, and you know, what we've been experiencing out in the streets. So yeah, we try to be mindful of this both at a very sort of a macro and a micro level. So really good question, and it's something that's extremely important.
Not to wax poetic, but I think there's a lot. COVID is terrible, but not everything that comes from COVID is bad. And I think two of the really good things is like I had knock on wood. I until this all started, I had never missed a shift, and I've come to work and I've had IVs and I have been, you know, I've vomited in bathrooms because that was what doctors were supposed to do. And I think we've reached now, if you have a sore throat, you go home, right? And so I think that cultural shift in every hospital, I think will remain at some level moving forward. And I think that's a really positive thing. The days I think of doctors working sick, even if it's not COVID, it's probably not a good thing. And the second thing is, especially in Chicago, you know, we've become much more open about talking about things that are stressing us out as a group. And so before COVID, it was social unrest, right? It was, for a while, our residents were getting stopped on and off the highway because the city was closed down due to protests. And those things are stressful, right? It's stressful, whatever it may have been that was going on at the time. And then COVID happened, and especially if you're somebody like Hendo, who maybe doesn't have as much family nearby, that's stressful, right? And so we've reached a point now where we're having lectures from these guys to just talk about that and how we can move past that and help each other. And I think that, you know, the days of the stoic physician not talking about their feelings is probably gone too. And that's a positive, I think, from COVID. So we'll see.
Yeah. And I mean, I think some of this also comes down to sort of like the camaraderie that we were talking about before. Like a couple of weeks ago, I had like a young, healthy, fit guy who died in front of his family, literally just like dropped dead in front of his family. And he came in and we coded him for a long time. And it was a shitty case. Like,
yeah, it was brutal.
It was terrible. It was heartbreaking. And Like I started crying in the room, like the guy's fiance was crying in the room, his brother's like outside in the hall screaming. And after we called the code, like we had a moment of silence, and I had to leave. I had to go cry in the ambulance bay for like 15 minutes. And I could feel that everyone else in the room, like in the ED in general, like it felt similarly, like was there for me. And like we came back in, I don't think we'd gotten slotted any more patients. It was right at sign out, it was a 6A shift. And like no one said anything, but like people patted me on the back. Like I just knew that everyone else had my back. And so I think that goes a long way to deal, and that's not unusual. And that goes a long way to dealing with, those difficult cases, even if it's not necessarily formalized. I think it has become a little bit more formalized due to COVID and due to just talking about it more.
Yeah, I think I just want to echo that from like, Justin, if you're asking from like a resident standpoint, which, it's hard to capture in a Zoom, discussing our approach. It's embedded in this culture is why I think Hendo and I came here, and what like we'll reflect on when we leave. It's that subtle, like knowing glance, picked up 3 of your patients while you were, had to take a walk. It's the walk with you after shift. It's the walk with you the next day into work. And it's like that, like I said, that unspoken stuff. And I think what Tim and I are trying to do is like, one, capture that, appreciate that in sort of like as part of the core curriculum and give it a name. And then also make it not soft, to be frank, make it part of like how we get better and how we learn and how we bond about it, and make it part of like why we do it. And to Tim's point, like I can at least feel with this cohort that I have in my 3 years that like it is just becoming more and more ingrained. And of course, COVID is sort of, galvanizing it. And like I said, that's again, the silver lining, some things we're going to get really good at because of what COVID made us realize is important to us,
Before COVID, we were the place where if you had a really long shift, we loved to go get a drink after together. And then all the bars and restaurants closed. And a couple months into COVID, the first time, Bob Harwood, who was our first program director, he brought non-alcoholic beers, and we took over the physician's lounge at midnight after the 2:30s finish. And we just did our own because it was like, we missed it and it was part of our culture. We were saying now that everything's just closed again, we're just going to take over the doctor's lounge again. But I thought that spoke volumes, that to see him wheeling a cooler in the middle of a pandemic, I thought was just the greatest thing. Anything else? Any other questions before we let you guys go? Awesome. You guys have a great night. Elise, Aronson, Hendo, thank you guys so much for joining us. Feel free to shoot us emails. We're on Twitter, everybody except Hendo. Come reach us. We're happy to talk at any time about this or whatever. And good luck this season.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye-bye.